This is Party Wall Pro, the podcast where surveyors tell you how they first started and how they've grown their business, making it easier for you to get to the top.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Party Wall Pro, the podcast. I'm very excited to have Michael Cooper with us today. Michael is currently a Director and Head of Neighbourly Matters at Colliers International, with offices around the country, the team spread in different offices around the country. Before that, Michael, you were with the CBRE and Savills. He's over 25 years of experience, and his knowledge is sought by many, including the RICS, who asked him to co-write the latest note for Party Wall. And he's now also a London committee member of the Pyramus and Thisbe Club, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Well, welcome to the show, Michael. Very excited to have you here. So, from your short bio, I see you've only worked with monsters, yes? Colliers International, CBRE, Savills. Is that how you started?
No, interestingly, I started post A levels. Didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and I joined a very small practice of surveyors as an architectural technician, and this was for an introduction from my father, who was a civil engineer, and suggested that the construction industry might be a path to follow. So that was where I started off.
All right, and from there.
Well, from there, I realised that this was a good career path, and building surveying at the time was a very sought after professionally, because there were very few surveyors around, and I think there still are to a certain extent. And then I went back to university, got a degree, and got very interested in party wall surveying during that degree course, and fell out the other end and joined a very small practice, and started specialising in party walls long before I moved on to the big corporate organisations that you mentioned. So it was through choice that I went into party walls as a specialism. But I did spend a couple of years with other organisations learning general surveying, and then moving on to get my charter.
Right. Oh, so actually, yeah. So from very early on, you were tempted and interested by party wall. That's quite interesting, because normally people kind of tend to fall into it, whereas that was your path. And so it would be interesting to know actually the difference. Because I think you're one of the first ones that has been consistently, well, not consistently, but at least recently with bigger corporations, the kind of difference between working with the Goliaths of this world as opposed to the smaller practices, and what are the kind of pros and cons?
Well, I think there's advantages to both. My suggestion is, though, that when in party walls in particular, we cross a wide range of clients, from small residential developments right the way up to large commercial developments. But the approach dictated by the legislation itself is one of consistency. So it doesn't matter if it's a large project or a small project. The difference between working for a large organisation versus a small organisation, I think there are advantages to both. In a larger organisation, the pool of resources and knowledge is more readily available, particularly in-house, and that's very useful. Even as a party wall surveyor, we often come across things that we're not familiar with, and we use other professionals to advise us in the in the administration of the Act. And I think it's quite advantageous to have those other professionals sitting near you or nearby that you can rely upon for that type of support. In a smaller organisation, you've obviously got to go looking for that type of information. Doesn't mean to say it's not available, but it's less readily available, should I say. But of course, there's also the disadvantages that come with a corporate structure, and probably having to understand more international law and how that affects your business on a day-to-day basis, that introduces an element of red tape. But I think, from my own view, having worked in both, I'm a party wall practitioner, so I run a specialist team within a large organisation, and I think that's no different to running a small or a team within your own business or in a small business. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing.
Right, yeah. And in terms of workload, so I guess in a smaller practice, you need to go out there and get work, whereas in a big international corporation like that, you do get work from other departments as well.
That's very true. Having said that, though, my first corporate, for want of a better description, I was very much on my own, and you have to still build up the confidence even within your own organisation. Other people will have clients, and a client is a very personal thing, I find. It tends to be less corporate, even within large organisations. It tends to be individual contact, and people within the organisation want to know that you're good at what you do before they introduce you to clients. So, nevertheless, I think you're still building up a business within a business, whether you're in a corporate or a small practice, and it is about your own reputation. Whilst being in a larger practice does help for the introductions, clients are very, in the party wall world, they're very used to using a particular individual for party wall, rights of light, or other neighbourly matters, and very reluctant to change. And I think it's convincing your colleagues and convincing their clients that you know what you're doing. And I don't think the work comes flowing in as much as people think it might. We still go hunting for it, and we still have to convince clients that we're good at what we do.
Right. Okay. So in terms of ratio, like as in party wall kind of support, the support function for other departments and your own standalone stuff, what would you say?
I would hazard to say that the majority of my team's work comes through the contacts that I have established over the years. Great. I've recently joined Colliers within the last year or so, and I think that there's a recognition there amongst the Colliers team that this is a very good service line. We're introducing rights of light services and other complementary services to Neighbourly Matters, and I think that there's a recognition there that we're a growing brand within the brand. People are having a lot more confidence in us. So we're going places, I think. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. Thank you. So actually, well, that fits in well with one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, okay, let's go back 25 years, and how did you manage to get your first party wall instruction by yourself? Not where you were working, where you got your first job per se, but as the first owner that came to you individually and said, "Michael, I need help on something."
Well, I think I'd been working in a small practice for a number of years. Eventually decided to sort of branch away from a very experienced and well-known specialist at the time, and I went and joined a large organisation. And it was a client that followed me from an experience he had had with me as somebody else's assistant, strangely. And he had the confidence to place an instruction with me as a named surveyor. I must admit, I had my own nerves at the time, because moving from an assistant, albeit I was a senior surveyor, but still an assistant to a named surveyor, into the role of being a named surveyor, I was quite concerned. And I did as thorough a job as I could, and actually we built on that relationship, and he's still a client now, as I'm pleased to say. And part of his organisation, as it grew and expanded, people joined and moved on and joined other organisations. They've all remained and are clients to this day as well. So it was a great first job, because it led to many, many more.
All right. And so that was commercial. That was your first, not residential, it's commercial stuff.
It was a large house builder at the time, and it was a job on the River Thames. It was a very interesting job. There was an awful lot that came out of it, and I learnt a lot. It was on the site of an old abattoir, and before that, a candle factory. And there were all sorts of issues with regards to contaminated land, etc. Large excavations had to take place, all of which were notifiable under the Act on adjacent properties. It was really interesting and a real experience and quite exciting. And it also brought in other areas of neighbourly matters, negotiation of licences for access, oversailing for cranes, all of which we went into and delivered for the client at the end of the day. They got a very good development and were very happy with what they had. Strangely enough, that same client, though, went on to instruct me on a small extension on his house. So it wasn't entirely, commercial development, but it led on to smaller residential development as well. So.
Oh, that's good. So how did you do to develop it from this one client that came to you and to kind of a sustainable practice over the years? So obviously, you get your first job, you're all excited and stuff, and so where do you take it from there? What's the next step?
Well, that was a struggle. It took time. It was word of mouth, the one client, and as I said, people that work for him and moving on to other organisations. I think you have to deliver. You have to be professional. You have to stand by your own convictions and be reliable. But also, it does help when you are starting off. You have the time to spend on every job and every client. And that's something that I press upon my team now, is find the time to speak to your clients all the time. Keep them on side, make them understand that you're there for them, because when they have the confidence to use you, they will pass your name on to others. And over the years, that's basically how we've developed quite a strong presence within the party wall surveying arena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's funny. That's kind of, it comes back all the time. It's consistency, and there's no kind of secret weapon to develop a fast-growing party wall practice, is there?
I wish there was. I think you have to demonstrate that you can do it. You have to learn to adapt. The legislation itself doesn't change, but the case law behind it does. And you have to stay in tune with that. You have to be on the ball. You have to recognise what those county court decisions or even higher court decisions mean to the interpretation that you place on the Act. You have to be forward-thinking, forward-moving, and also at the same time, I think clients expect you to deliver perhaps more than's on the packet. They want you to advise them when something else might be coming that they haven't seen coming, and be ahead of the game. So, no, there isn't a magic answer to just suddenly getting clients. I don't think that happens.
And actually, you said that the legislation doesn't change, but case law does. How do you keep on top of case law?
But there's a very good network of surveyors. There's various clubs and organisations. Some are better known than others. Many of us are members of a particular club called the Pyramus and Disby Club, which is, it is, as the club suggests, it doesn't make you an expert, but it gives you the opportunities to meet with your peers, discuss cases that have happened, or even be enlightened on a case that you didn't know about. Staying in touch with other surveyors and understanding how opinions are changing, or even how construction is changing, and how we interpret that construction within the definitions provided by the legislation. It really is a case of networking with your peers, at the same time with the legal profession, and keeping up to speed with county court or higher court decisions, and sharing that information with others, because you would expect them to share it back as well. It keeps us all on our toes, keeps us all enlightened. We don't necessarily all have the same opinions, but at the same time, we can help to formulate an interpretation of some awkward pieces of legislation or awkward interpretations, and maybe come to a more, shall we say, a better supported argument where there are more people involved that have the same view, and we can put that forward perhaps to encourage, shall we say, discussion or development of ideas.
Yeah. So, okay. So once you are in the circle, you'll stay updated. But so how do you get into that circle? So it's if you as a young surveyor, or even not someone who's interested in the area, what's the best way to get there?
You can join the club. You don't have to be chartered. You don't have to have any qualification. You don't have to have years of experience. Come along and meet with more senior surveyors, and they're always willing to share an experience or two over a beer. But also, I think it is a case of asking the question, be prepared to listen, learn from the worldly wise. I remember when I first joined the club, I listened to many inexperienced surveyor and heard of their experiences. Now I form my own opinions. I don't necessarily agree with them all, but it was a great starting point for me, and it was a good way to learn more and listen to experiences. Really, when it is all about experience, being a good party wall surveyor is experience. But there's no reason why you can't have the experience of others supporting you when you're learning, and still be very, very good. You may not have had those experiences yourself, but to listen to others, learn what they did in a particular circumstance and how to get around awkward problems, will stand you in good stead.
Yeah. And so if you wanted to study, where do you start in terms of studying from the graduates, and where do they look? Because like the interesting thing is, like, what kind of people do you recruit with what kind of background is your preference? What makes a good party wall surveyor?
Well, I start with graduates that are straight out of university. One of the criteria for me is that they must have an interest in neighbourly matters. They must be interested in party walls. Whatever that interest is, it's something, it is a basic fundamental to do in party wall surveying. You have to have an interest, and you want to develop that interest. The starting point, I would suggest, is reading the Act, giving your own interpretation to it, understanding it. Then there are books that are available that have been written by eminent surveyors or even members of the legal profession that you can pick those up and read them. I start with what we call the Green Book, which is published by the Pyramids and Thisbe Club. It gives an interpretation of the legislation itself for various sections, and then its application. We always start our graduates with the understanding the basic forms, the form of notice, standard letters, standard documentation. And then we do take the time to teach our graduates the purpose for various sort of sentences or phrases that we use in various letters, or why we use those phrases and how it came about. So we ask them to look at the history of party walls, and we try and teach them the history of party walls and an understanding of why we use certain terms or definitions to describe certain actions, etc. Because it is primarily, it's born out of case law, an understanding of what the works are, what's involved. Without wanting to preach on the Party Wall Act itself, the Party Wall Act is there to afford one owner rights to develop, but at the same time making them look closely at what they're doing and in the context of protecting an adjoining owner and ensuring that they are looking after the interests of the adjoining owner while having what they want, which is the development. And I think our graduates, we start them with a job shadowing surveyors, more senior surveyors who will take the time and explain both the work and the application of the Act. And then we encourage reading and CPD and turning up to events like the Pyramids and Disney Club and various other organisational events and CPD lectures. That's another advantage, I guess, of being in a large organisation. We have the opportunity to plenty of CPD talks. So we do encourage our graduates to turn up and learn more about the wider world out there, and at the same time focusing their attention on party rules and neighbourly matters.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think what makes a good... A lot of people have been saying that the knowledge of the construction is very important, because you can know the Act inside out, but you need the practical element there. So are you looking for structural engineers and maybe with background of architecture and that kind of stuff as well, or?
Certainly, for our graduates, we look for people that come from a background of a degree in surveying. That's not to say that an architectural degree won't stand you in good stead as well, but a professional qualification or professional degree where there's an element of understanding of construction technique. It's very important when applying the Party Wall Act that you understand what the works actually are, and it takes a long time, I think, to learn the subterranean world. Party wall surveyors can call upon other experts to offer them advice, and I often use an engineer who advises me on subterranean work. That's not to say that over the years I haven't developed a very good understanding of subterranean development, but nevertheless, my knowledge of certain aspects isn't there, and I rely upon other professionals to guide me. But I do need to know what questions to ask them. I think understanding construction is paramount to being a good party wall surveyor. The understanding legislation is equally important, but you need to understand how buildings go together and the potential for an effect on an adjacent structure. Because after all, I think our role as party wall surveyors is to mitigate the effect of construction and to warn both developing owners and adjoining owners of the potential effect. And not understanding construction, not understanding what drawings are placed in front of you, not understanding what you're awarding, would be a very great mistake.
Yeah. All right. So you've been doing this for 25 years. You're obviously enjoying it. But the flip side, what is the frustrating side of being a party wall surveyor?
Probably one thing sums it up. We're there to resolve a dispute. A dispute, the term dispute by its very nature is something that suggests that there are two neighbours at war. The neighbours don't need necessarily to be at war. They're looking for you to come in and advise and protect property and protect assets. I think some surveyors do take it personally and think that we're there to create a dispute, and I think that that's a frustrating thing. I would suggest that many surveyors need to understand that the role of the appointed surveyor is really there to look after the properties and make sure that the permitted works are managed correctly, and that the works are permissible, first of all, within the legislation. But then also to understand that we're not at war with one another. We're both on the same side. We're administering the Act, and we're there not to create further dispute. We're there to resolve the disputes in hand. And I think that's one of my frustrations, is that surveyors sometimes look too far beyond the actual instruction. Now, I'm keen to ensure that when I'm involved, that we look very closely at what we're there for. We do advise clients of matters that are outside of the Act, but we don't necessarily become involved with them unless the client wishes to. And we're not there to create further dispute. We're there to resolve the dispute or resolve the matters in hand. So my biggest bugbear, as it were, is is surveyors that run off at tangents and don't deal with what we're supposed to be dealing with under the Act.
Yeah, yeah. So other surveyors, basically.
Well, no, I mean it's probably unfair to say that. It's often clients that don't understand the role as well. I think that it's very easy for neighbours that don't see each other, don't understand what the works are, and don't have it explained well to them, to go off at tangents. And I think it's very important for party wall surveyors to recognise where these tangents can come in, and help to guide the client away from conflict and more into resolution of dispute. It's very important, I think, in our role as party wall surveyors that we administer the Act with an even hand for both owners and correctly as the Act advises, and not be led by a particular client or to go off at tangents when we don't need to. Deal with the matters in hand and get it done properly and professionally.
Mm. Do you have an example of a case that went horribly wrong?
Horribly wrong? No, fortunately, but I would suggest that there are occasions when construction techniques that are awarded are not necessarily followed. And as a party wall surveyor, we're not there to enforce the awards that we make. And I think we're often seen as a sort of policing organisation. We're the person that people can run to and say, well, the chap next door isn't putting temporary works in. And unfortunately, the legislation doesn't lend itself to being policed once the award has been made. It's for the owners to seek enforcement of awards, and that has to rely then on the legal profession and injunctions and various other sort of nasty mechanisms. And I think it's when the award isn't followed, either by an owner or by a contractor, that things can go horribly wrong. We are making an award, after all, that is robust, and it should be followed. And that's when it does go wrong, when it's not followed, ends in litigation, and litigation has all the horrors of expense and time, and not least, I don't think anybody necessarily wins in litigation because of the cost and expense involved with it. And that is really when awards are not followed, and nobody wins when that happens.
Yeah. The only winners are the lawyers normally. Sure.
Yes.
So to conclude, kind of the listeners are people who are interested in starting a party wall practice, or are interested in joining a party wall firm. A word of advice for someone who wants to start a practice from scratch, let's say. Where should they start in terms of even education, and then where to go from there, how to get access, maybe get their first instruction without scraping the land registry website, obviously. Where should they start?
Well, it's certainly not scraping the land registry websites and development. That's cold calling is really not on. I think first of all, the knowledge of construction and a background in construction is essential. Don't start trying to think that you're a party wall surveyor or any other type of surveyor without being qualified in some way, or at least having a good level of experience of construction techniques, and don't offer that you are a party wall surveyor when you haven't got that type of grounding, because you're not, in my view. A party wall surveyor does need to have construction knowledge. Where you learn that is obviously through development of a career, normally starting with a university degree, and moving on to a professional charter or qualification with the RICS or RIBA. That's a good starting point. Learning construction is first. Moving on to party walls, I think it helps to have some experience, perhaps with another organisation. Setting up practice on your own when you are a chartered surveyor means that you can actually go out and do any field of surveying. I wouldn't recommend doing any field of surveying. I certainly don't touch certain aspects of surveying because I've never had training or experience in them. Stick with what you know what you know what you don't know, but know where to find an answer is my advice always to graduates. I would also say it's important to recognise your limitations, and even in the administration of the Party Wall Act, I call in, as I said, other professionals sometimes, like an arboriculturist, for instance, when I need advice on whether or not a tree will die as a consequence of somebody digging up an excavation, or an engineer when it comes to soil and investigations and loading capacities and so on. So I think you need to understand the limitations. How you go about growing a business, I would say it's reputation. Do a good job. Keep the clients informed. One of the biggest mistakes that we have now with ever increasing technology is not picking up the phone and not informing clients of the steps that we're taking. It's very easy for us to go quiet for 2 months and then our clients get disgruntled with the fact that we're not telling them that we're doing something, thinking we're not doing anything, where we might be working flat out to do everything we can for them. We need to keep clients informed, and I think that's, if you are setting up your own business or starting in any profession, including party walls or building surveying, is understand that at the end of the day we're there for our clients, we're there for their needs and for their developments, and we need to sort of keep them appraised of what's happening. They don't understand our world. We're there to help them, guide them through what can be a tricky process.
Yeah. So you mentioned technology quickly.
Yes.
Any tools that you recommend? Not our tool, obviously, but what kind of technology do you actually use on a day-to-day basis?
Well, it's strange. I mean, technology has developed considerably. We take condition surveys with dictaphones, but now I can speak into my phone and have my phone translate that to a Word document and print it out almost word for word. Technology is certainly enhancing the way that we work. It's adding value, but at the same time, it can hinder the way that we work if we don't use it wisely. Too many people send emails too quickly without consideration, quite often repeating themselves. Typos and grammatical errors abound, and I think we need to slow down a little bit in the use of technology and start talking to one another again. But it is helping, certainly with digital age, cameras, etc. When I first started surveying, we used to have to print out thousands of photographs. It took an absolute age. I remember sticking them all into our reports, but now we can send it all on a disk to a client, which is very helpful. So yeah, I'm for technology, but don't let it take over, and remain communication on a face-to-face or one-to-one basis with clients is important.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Great. Well, thank you so much. Who do you think I should interview next?
There's a young lady called Keely Matthews at Malcolm Hollis. She's now a senior surveyor, I think, and I've known her for a number of years. She has an excellent way with clients, very good communication skills, and I think that she would be a good advocate for the profession and for party wall surveyors, and she is a very good party wall surveyor. So that's my recommendation.
Great idea, because I'm looking for more women to interview. So.
Yes.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. It was great to have you.
You're welcome.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Take care.